The ship called Horizon moved slowly through the darkness of space. Inside its metal walls, Commander Jake Harris stood near the window and watched the stars pass by. He had spent 20 years serving in the Earth fleet, but nothing had prepared him for this moment. Humanity was about to meet the Galactic Confederation for the first time, and he was the one chosen to represent his entire species. Dr. Lisa Monroe walked up beside him. She was a small woman with brown hair and kind eyes. She had studied alien languages and cultures for most of her adult life, and now she would finally see if her work meant anything at all. "Are you nervous?" she asked. Jake nodded slowly. "More than I have ever been. We are about to find out if we belong in this universe or if we are just visitors who arrived too late." The Horizon approached a massive station that floated near a blue and green planet called Valaxis Prime. The station was larger than any city on Earth. Its towers reached up like fingers, trying to touch the heavens, and lights of every color shone from thousands of windows. Ships of strange shapes moved around it like insects around a hive. When the human delegation stepped off their ship, they were met by beings unlike anything they had ever seen. The Valorians were creatures made of silver light, floating just above the ground. The Kethra were tall insect-like beings with 4 arms and eyes that reflected everything around them. There were others too, beings of stone, beings of water, beings that seemed to exist in multiple places at once. A Valorian drifted forward. His name was Arthur Anai, and he was the High Speaker of the Galactic Council. His voice entered their minds directly, bypassing their ears entirely. "Welcome, humans," he said, though his tone carried no warmth. "We have watched your species for some time. We know of your history. We know of your wars." Jake felt the weight of those words. Humanity had fought countless wars throughout its history. 2 world wars. Hundreds of smaller conflicts. Even after reaching the stars, humans had argued and fought among themselves. It was their nature, some said. Others called it their greatest shame. The delegation was led through long hallways filled with members of other species. Jake noticed how they looked at the humans. Some stared with curiosity, but many more looked away with expressions that suggested disgust or fear. He heard whispers in languages he did not understand, but Lisa translated some of them quietly. "They call us the Angry Ones," she said. "They say we are driven by rage and cannot control ourselves." The council chamber was a massive circular room with seats rising up on all sides. Representatives from 47 species sat in their designated areas. At the center was a platform where the humans were told to stand. Jake felt like he was on trial. Arthur and I addressed the assembly. "The humans request membership in the Galactic Confederation. They wish to join our alliance and share in our knowledge and protection. The council will now hear arguments for and against their admission." A Kethra representative stood. His name was Vertalax, and he spoke with clicking sounds that were translated by a device on his chest. "I have studied human history extensively. They are a species that solves problems through violence. They fight each other over resources, over beliefs, over simple differences in appearance. How can we trust such beings with our secrets? How can we allow them access to technologies they might use to destroy?" Another representative, a being made of flowing water contained in a crystalline shell, added her voice. "The Confederation has maintained peace for 10,000 cycles. We achieved this by learning to suppress our baser instincts. Humans have not yet evolved beyond their primitive emotions. They are not ready." Jake stepped forward. "May I speak?" Arthur and I hesitated, then nodded. "You call us angry," Jake said. "You look at our history and see only war. But you do not see what we were fighting for. We fought against those who would enslave us. We fought against those who would destroy what we loved. We fought because we believed that some things were worth dying for." He paused and looked around the chamber. Yes, we have made mistakes. We have hurt each other. But we have also learned. We have grown. And we are still growing. Lisa stepped forward as well. Every species in this room went through a period of conflict. You all have wars in your past. The difference is that you have had thousands of years to forget them. We are young. Our wounds are still fresh. But that does not mean we cannot heal. The council debated for hours. Jake and Lisa waited outside the chamber, surrounded by guards who watched them as if they might attack at any moment. When the doors finally opened, Arthur and I floated toward them with the verdict. The council has decided, he announced. Humanity will not be granted full membership in the Galactic Confederation. You will be given observer status only. You may watch and learn, but you will have no vote and no voice in our decisions. Perhaps in time, when you have proven yourselves, this decision will be reconsidered. Jake wanted to argue. He wanted to shout and demand that they be given a fair chance. But he knew that would only prove their point. So he simply nodded and thanked them for their consideration. On the journey back to the horizon, Lisa spoke quietly. I noticed something while we were there. Something that worries me. What do you mean? Jake asked. These species have forgotten how to struggle. They have had peace for so long that they no longer know how to fight. Their weapons are old. Their strategies are outdated. They rely entirely on the stability of their alliance. She shook her head. What happens if something threatens that stability? What happens if they face an enemy that cannot be reasoned with? Jake looked out at the stars. Then they will learn why humans fight. He did not know how soon those words would become truth. In the darkness between galaxies, something ancient and terrible was already moving toward them. It had consumed civilizations before. It had ended species and devoured worlds. And it was coming for the Galactic Confederation next. The angry humans, rejected and dismissed, would soon become the only hope the galaxy had left. 3 months passed after humanity was rejected by the Galactic Council. Life continued as normal for most of the Confederation. Trade ships moved between worlds. Diplomats argued about small matters. The elder races congratulated themselves on maintaining peace for another cycle. Then the darkness came. The first warning arrived from a small mining colony on the edge of Confederation space. A distress signal was sent, filled with screaming and terror, and then there was only silence. When a patrol ship was sent to investigate, they found nothing. The colony was gone. Not destroyed, not damaged, but simply erased. The buildings were empty shells. The people had vanished without a trace. More reports followed. Colony after colony went dark. Ships disappeared without sending any message. Something was moving through Confederation space, and it was hungry. The Galactic Council gathered in emergency session. Their scientists analyzed the evidence and came to a terrifying conclusion. The Kazul had arrived. The Kazul were creatures from the void between galaxies. No one knew where they came from or how old they were. What they knew was simple and horrible. The Kazul were a swarm. They consumed everything they touched. They took the resources of planets and the bodies of living beings to fuel their endless growth. They had no language, no culture, and no mercy. They existed only to feed. Arthur and I addressed the council with a voice that trembled for the first time in centuries. We must prepare our defenses. We must gather our fleets and stand against this threat. But when the fleets were gathered, the council discovered a terrible truth. 10,000 years of peace had made them soft. Their warships were old and poorly maintained. Their soldiers had trained for ceremonies, not combat. Their tactics were based on theories that had never been tested against a real enemy. The Kazul tore through the first defensive line in a matter of hours. Their living ships moved like nightmares given form, twisting shapes of metal and flesh that screamed as they killed. The Valorian fleet retreated. The Kethra attempted to communicate, to negotiate, to reason with the swarm. They were consumed without a single response. Panic spread across the Confederation. Species that had lived together in harmony began to turn on each other. Some blamed others for attracting the Kazul. Some fought over the remaining safe zones. The Great Alliance was falling apart before the first real battle had even been fought. On the human colony world of New Montana, a man named Ben Carter watched the news feeds with growing horror. He was the captain of a research vessel called the Defiance, a small ship designed for scientific exploration rather than combat. His crew of 47 humans had been studying unusual energy readings in a nearby nebula when the invasion began. His communications officer, a young woman named Amy Chun, looked up from her station with tears in her eyes. "Captain, I am receiving a distress signal. It is a Confederation refugee fleet. Over 2 million civilians, including children. They are being hunted by Kazul harvesters." Ben walked to her station and listened to the transmission. He heard voices speaking a dozen alien languages, all of them saying the same thing. "Help us, please help us. We are going to die." He looked around at his crew. They were scientists and engineers, not soldiers. The Defiance had minimal weapons and thin armor. Going to help would almost certainly mean death. "What is the location of the refugee fleet?" He asked. Amy gave him the coordinates. It was a journey of 6 hours at maximum speed. "Can the Confederation send help?" Amy checked her screens and shook her head. "Their nearest ships are 2 days away. The refugees will not last that long." Ben closed his eyes. He thought about his wife back on Earth. He thought about his daughter, who was starting school this year. He thought about all the things he would never see again if he made this choice. Then he thought about 2 million people, including children, dying alone in the darkness of space. He thought about what it meant to be human. He opened his eyes and looked at his crew. "I am going to help them. I cannot order any of you to come with me. This is not our fight. The Confederation rejected us. They called us primitive. They called us dangerous. They said we were too angry to be trusted." He paused. "But I think they were wrong about what our anger means. We do not fight because we enjoy destruction. We fight because we cannot stand by while innocent people suffer. I am going to that fleet. Anyone who wishes to leave may take the escape pods now." No one moved. Amy wiped her eyes and smiled. "We are with you, Captain." Danny Walsh, the chief engineer, cracked his knuckles. "I always wanted to see what this old ship could really do." Dr. Lisa Monroe, who had joined the crew after her experience at the council, stood up from her station. "The Confederation does not believe in us. Let us show them what they are missing." Ben felt a warmth in his chest that he had not expected. These people, these wonderful, foolish, brave people, were willing to die for strangers who had dismissed their entire species. "Set a course for the Korath Nebula," he ordered. "Maximum speed. And send a message to those refugees. Tell them that help is coming. Tell them that humanity remembers what it means to hope." The Defiance turned and accelerated into the darkness. 47 humans raced toward an enemy that had destroyed empires. They had no plan, no backup, and no guarantee of survival. But they had something the Confederation had forgotten. They had the fire that burned in human hearts when innocent lives were at stake. They had the anger that was born not from hatred, but from love. The so-called angry ones were coming. And the Kazul would learn that some prey knew how to bite back. The Defiance dropped out of faster-than-light travel at the edge of the Korath Nebula. The sight that greeted them was worse than anything the crew had imagined. The refugee fleet was a collection of damaged ships, civilian transports, and old freighters that had never been designed for combat. They floated in a tight cluster, surrounded on all sides by 12 Kazul hunter ships. The hunters were horrible to look at. They were living machines, part metal and part flesh, covered in spines and teeth that seemed to grow directly from their hulls. They moved through space with a grace that should have been impossible for something so large. And they were taking their time. They circled the refugees slowly, enjoying the terror they caused, then stared at the screen. They are playing with them. They could attack at any moment, but they want them to be afraid first. Lisa nodded grimly. The Kazul feed on more than just bodies. Some researchers believe they consume emotions as well. Fear makes the prey taste better to them. The refugee ships had noticed the defiance. Transmissions flooded the communication channels. Some were confused, asking who they were. Others begged for help. And still others warned them to leave while they still could. Ben opened a channel that broadcast on all frequencies. "This is Captain Ben Carter of the human vessel Defiance. We are here to help. Any hostile ship that attempts to harm these refugees will have to go through us first." For a long moment, there was silence. Then the Kazul responded. It was not a language exactly, but a sound that seemed to crawl inside the mind. It was laughter. Cold, cruel laughter that mocked the tiny ship that dared to challenge them. "They think we are joking," Amy said. "Good," Ben replied. "They will not be prepared for what comes next. Danny, I need you to overload the forward emitters. Create the biggest electromagnetic pulse you can manage. Lisa, you said you studied Kazul communication patterns. Can you jam their signals?" Lisa looked uncertain. "I can try, but I have never tested it in actual combat. Now is the time to learn. Amy, I need you to calculate the exact ignition points for the gases in this nebula. If we hit them right, we can create chain explosions that will take out multiple ships at once." His crew moved into action. The Defiance was a small ship, but it was built by humans. It was designed to be flexible, adaptable, and tough. And its crew was determined to use every advantage they had. The first Kazul ship moved toward them. It opened its mouth, a massive hole filled with rotating teeth, and prepared to consume the Defiance whole. "Now, Danny!" Then shouted. The electromagnetic pulse hit the hunter ship like a hammer. Its systems flickered and died. The living machine screamed in confusion and pain as it lost control of its own body. Before it could recover, Amy fired a precise shot into a pocket of nebula gas directly beside it. The explosion was massive. The hunter ship was torn apart in a ball of fire that lit up the darkness. The other hunters stopped circling. They turned toward the Defiance with something that looked like surprise. Then they attacked all at once. "Evasive maneuvers," Ben commanded. The Defiance danced through space. It was smaller and faster than the massive hunters, and Ben used every trick he knew to stay ahead of their attacks. Amy continued to calculate explosion points, creating walls of fire that damaged or destroyed 4 more enemy ships. Danny ran from station to station, keeping the ship together through sheer willpower and engineering skill. Lisa worked at her console, fingers flying over the controls. "I have found their communication frequency. If I jam it, they will not be able to coordinate their attacks." "Do it." She activated the jamming signal. The effect was immediate. The remaining Kazul ships began to move erratically, crashing into each other and firing wildly in random directions. Without their central link, they were just animals following instinct rather than strategy. But the battle was far from over. The hunters might be confused, but they were still deadly. One of them managed to get close enough to slash at the Defiance with its claws. The hull was torn open. Alarms screamed throughout the ship. "We have a breach in Section 7. Danny shouted. "If we do not seal it, we will lose life support." Amy looked at the damage report. Section 7 was near the refugee ships. If the breach expanded, it would expose hundreds of civilians to the vacuum of space. Without thinking, she ran from her station toward the damaged section. "Amy, wait!" Ben called after her, but she was already gone. She reached the breach and found a nightmare. The hull was peeling away, and the cold of space was rushing in. She grabbed a welding torch and began to seal the gap, even as the air around her grew thin. Her lungs burned, her vision blurred, but she kept working. The breach was sealed. The refugees were saved. But Amy collapsed on the floor, her body too damaged by the exposure. She died with a smile on her face, knowing that she had made a difference. The battle continued for 6 more hours. 18 crew members gave their lives. But when Confederation reinforcements finally arrived, they found something they had never expected. The Defiance was still flying. 8 Kazul hunter ships had been destroyed, and 2 million refugees were alive. The rescue fleet stared in disbelief. A single human ship, a science vessel with minimal weapons, had done what their entire military had failed to accomplish. They had fought the Kazul, and won. News of the Battle of Korath Nebula spread across the galaxy faster than light itself. The species who had dismissed humans as primitive and angry now spoke of them in hushed tones. The angry ones had come to save strangers who had rejected them. They had died to protect people who had called them dangerous, and in that moment, everything began to change. The story of the Defiance spread through the Confederation like a fire that could not be stopped. Every species heard about the 47 humans who had stood against an impossible enemy. They heard about Amy Chun, who gave her life to save refugees who were not even her own kind. They heard about Danny Walsh, who kept a dying ship flying through pure stubbornness. They heard about Captain Ben Carter, who chose to fight when running would have been so much easier. And they asked themselves a question they had never considered before. What kind of species does such things? Commander Jake Harris was summoned back to the Galactic Council. But this time, he did not come as a rejected outsider begging for acceptance. He came as something else entirely. He came as hope. The council chamber was full when he arrived. Every species sent their highest representatives. They stood as he entered, a gesture of respect that had never been given to a human before. Even Arthur and I, the Valorian High Speaker, who had once dismissed humanity so easily, bowed his head as Jake took his place at the center of the room. "You have questions," Jake said. It was not a question. Arthur and I floated forward. His silver light seemed dimmer now, less proud. "We do. We watched the recording of the battle at Korath Nebula many times. We analyzed every decision, every action, every sacrifice. And we still do not understand." He paused. "Why did they do it? Your people gained nothing from that fight. They had no obligation to help. We had rejected them. We had insulted them. And yet they died for us. Why?" Jake was quiet for a moment. He thought about the crew of the Defiance. He thought about Amy Chun's smile as she sealed that breach. He thought about what it meant to be human. "You called us the angry species," he finally said. "You looked at our history and saw only violence. But you did not see what the violence was for." He looked around the chamber at all the different beings watching him. "Humans do not fight because we enjoy destruction. We fight because we love. We love our families. We love our friends. We love strangers we have never met, just because they are alive and they matter. And when something threatens what we love, we become angry. Not blind rage, not mindless violence, but a fire inside that says this is wrong, and I will not allow it to continue." He stepped closer to Arthur and I. The crew of the Defiance did not know those refugees. They had never met them. But they knew that 2 million innocent people were going to die, and they could not accept that. They were angry, yes. Angry that the universe would allow such cruelty. Angry that no one else was coming to help. And that anger gave them the strength to do the impossible. The chamber was silent. For the first time in 10,000 years, the elder races had nothing to say. Finally, Lartalex, the Kethra, who had argued against human membership, stood up. His clicking voice was humble now. We have forgotten something important. We achieve peace by suppressing our emotions. We taught ourselves not to feel anger, not to feel fear, not to feel anything that might lead to conflict. But in doing so, we also forgot how to feel love strong enough to fight for. Arthur and I looked at Jake with new understanding. Can you teach us? Can you help us remember what it means to care so deeply that we would die for it? Jake nodded slowly. We can try. But I warn you, it will not be easy. You cannot learn to fight without learning to feel. And feeling is painful. You will have to open yourselves to love, knowing that love can be lost. You will have to open yourselves to hope, knowing that hope can be crushed. That is the price of being truly alive. Ben Carter, now promoted to Admiral, was given command of the Confederation's training program. He traveled from world to world, teaching species who had never known combat how to defend themselves. But more than tactics and weapons, he taught them purpose. Do not think about killing, he told a group of young Valorians. Think about protecting. Imagine someone you love standing behind you. Imagine what you would do to keep them safe. That is where your strength comes from. Lisa Monroe developed psychological programs to help pacifist species find their inner fire without losing their souls. She worked with counselors and healers from 100 worlds, creating methods to awaken dormant instincts that had slept for millennia. Slowly, things began to change. Ships were repaired and upgraded. Soldiers trained with new determination. Species that had never worked together before formed bonds of friendship and trust. The Confederation was transforming from a peaceful alliance into something stronger, something that could fight. The Kazul noticed the change. Their advance slowed as they encountered resistance they had not expected. Battles that should have been easy victories became costly struggles. For the first time in their ancient existence, the swarm faced an enemy that would not simply surrender and die. And at the heart of that resistance were the humans. The angry ones. The so-called primitives who had been rejected and mocked. They stood on the front lines of every battle. They volunteered for the most dangerous missions. They died in numbers that should have broken their spirit, but they never stopped fighting, because they had something the Kazul could never understand. They had hope, and hope, they were learning, was the most dangerous weapon in the universe. The final battle was coming. Everyone in the Confederation knew it. The Kazul had been pushed back, but they were not defeated. They had gathered their forces in a region of dead space called the Void of Sorrows, a dark place where no stars shone and no life had ever existed. At the center of that void was their hive, the heart of the swarm that controlled every Kazul ship and creature across the galaxy. Admiral Ben Carter stood on the bridge of his new flagship, a vessel called Hope's Defiance. It was built from the remains of the original Defiance combined with technology from 30 different species. It was a symbol of what the Confederation had become. Not just an alliance of convenience, but a family forged in fire. Beside him stood Commander Niraval, a Valorian who had once voted against human membership in the Council. She had changed more than anyone. The silver light of her body now pulsed with colors that Valorians had forgotten they could produce. She had learned to feel anger. More importantly, she had learned to feel love. The fleet is ready, she reported. 3,000 ships from 47 species. Every being who can fight has volunteered. Ben nodded. And Jake? Lisa? They are leading the strike team. They insisted on being the ones to penetrate the hive. Ben closed his eyes. Jake Harris and Lisa Monroe had been his friends since the beginning of all this. They had been there when humanity was rejected. They had been there when the Defiance made its legendary stand. And now they were going on a mission that would almost certainly kill them. He wanted to stop them. He wanted to order them to stay safe. But he knew they would never accept that. They were humans. When something needed to be done, they did it. That was who they were. "Tell them I expect them back for dinner," he said softly. The combined fleet jumped into the void of sorrows. What they found was beyond anything they had imagined. The Gazul Hive was a living structure the size of a small moon, covered in thousands of ships that clung to it like parasites. The swarm had gathered everything it had for this final confrontation. The battle began immediately. Gazul ships launched toward the Allied fleet in waves that seemed endless. The void was filled with fire and death as ships from both sides were destroyed in the opening minutes. But the Confederation did not break. When human ships fell, Valorian vessels moved to fill the gaps. When Kethra cruisers were damaged, repair teams from a dozen species rushed to help. They fought as one, connected not by communication devices, but by something deeper. By love in the chaos of battle, a small shuttle slipped through the casual defenses. Jake Harris piloted while Lisa Monroe prepared the weapon that would end the war. It was a bioweapon designed from Lisa's research, a virus that would attack the central consciousness of the hive and destroy its ability to control the swarm. "We are approaching the core," Jake said. "Defenses are light. I think they are too focused on the main battle to notice us." Lisa looked at him with eyes that held no fear. "Jake, I want you to know something. When we first met at the council, I thought you were just a soldier. Someone who followed orders and did not think too deeply about things. I was wrong. You are the best person I have ever known." Jake smiled. "Save the goodbyes for later. We are going to survive this." But they both knew that was not true. The hive's core was protected by layers of living armor. Getting inside meant triggering defenses that would destroy their ship. This was always meant to be a one-way journey. They reached the core. Lisa activated the weapon. And as the Gazul defenses closed around them, Jake opened a communication channel to the fleet. "This is Commander Jake Harris to all allied ships. The weapon is deployed. The hive is dying. You need to hold on for just a little longer." His voice was calm, even peaceful. "It has been an honor serving with all of you. Every species, every being. You taught me that the universe is worth fighting for. You taught me that hope is real." Lisa took his hand. "Tell them it was worth it." The shuttle was consumed by Gazul defenders moments later. But the weapon had already done its work. The central consciousness of the hive screamed and died. Across the void of sorrows, Gazul ships suddenly stopped moving. They crashed into each other, fired randomly at nothing, or simply went silent. Without their guiding mind, they were nothing. The battle was over. The Confederation had won. When the survivors returned home, they were not greeted as victors, but as family. Species that had distrusted each other for centuries now embraced without hesitation. The barriers that had divided them had been burned away by the fire of war. The Galactic Council met one final time to decide humanity's place in the Confederation. But there was nothing to debate. By unanimous vote, humans were granted full membership. More than that, a new position was created just for them. Guardians of Hope. It would always be held by a human. To remind the galaxy of what they had learned. Years later, a monument was built on Valaxis Prime. It was the largest structure ever created by the Confederation, visible from orbit. On its surface were carved the names of every being who died in the war, regardless of species. There were millions of names in hundreds of languages, all equal in honor. At the base of the monument was a simple inscription. It was written in the human language of English first, then translated into every tongue in the galaxy. In our darkest hour, The so-called angry ones taught us that rage born of love is the greatest force in the universe. They did not bring war. They brought hope. And in the stars above, humanity continued to watch. They protected the weak. They fought for the helpless. They reminded the galaxy that anger was not a flaw to be suppressed, but a gift to be used wisely. The universe was vast and full of dangers, but it was no longer dark, because the angry humans had brought light, and that light would never go out.